Latin Kobango, Kuti Kuti, Kuti Yepi, Urulwengi Ngamya.
Hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can.
Wonderful.
Yes, we can.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. First, let me apologize for us starting late. We've been having some difficulties with our technology, but I do want to welcome everyone here today to our Africa Day celebration. We are excited to be in community with each and every one of you, and we are excited for the conversation that we are going to be having today. And so I am going to, for the sake of time, I'm going to pass. My name is Chandra Roxanne, and I am the Executive Director for Community Healing Network. I'm my 5th month into this incredible organization and the work that we're doing here. And so some of you that I know and some of you I will meet later today and throughout our work later after today. And so it's a pleasure to have you. And so I am going to pass it over to Babane, Dr. Onaje Muid, to lead us through our libations.
Blessings, family. Assalamu alaikum, Hotep, Baragani. I want to first ask permission from an elder in our community to start. I'm 72, so you have to be at least 73. So
Granted.
thank you. I was about to go to the other room to get my mother, who's 91, to get her permission. But we were able to shortcut that. Again, our apologies for not starting on time. And in the African way of thinking of time, we call it sasa, which means now. And now is the way of looking back, not just Sankofa, but looking back as everything that is real has happened already up until the very second that we're in. So we're in sasa. So this is a good space for us to be in. So everything is fine. And we know from the African point of view, things doesn't happen until we get there, right? So it's not the clock, it's not the physical numerical clock that is the timepiece for African people. It's the presence of the people that makes it the reality. So we are here, we are together. So with that acceptance of my request, I'd like us to engage in a moment of just presence, of silence, that is to presence ourselves in the space in which we're sitting, presence the foundations upon that which holds us, be it the chair, the couch, be it the room, be it the building sitting on Mother Earth, and know that Mother Earth is supporting all of us. Just be in that space of being held, and knowing that the universe has given us permission to exist, and in that permission comes a right and a responsibility. And one of the major responsibilities is to acknowledge how we are descendants of those who have come before us, because without them there is no us. We say Ubuntu. Ubuntu is a person becomes a person through other people. And I know we've been popularized with I am because we are therefore I am. I know that's what we've been taught, but I've been taught by another Ubuntu native speaking person that that's not the best translation. So I'm going to use the reference point from which it comes, South Africa, Ubuntu. When we pour libation, we are recognizing we acknowledging and participating in its responsibility to recognize ourselves and all that which we've come from. So to the Creator, we pour a libation, we are recognizing, we acknowledging and participating in its responsibility to recognize ourselves and all that which. I'm not sure how I had an echo from the universe, but that happened. So here's a plant, and we use a plant as everything comes from the earth, and we are recognizing that. So I'm pouring libation, and afterwards I say something, if you be so kind to say Ashe, which means it is so. To the Creator, from which all things are created, we say Ashe.
Okay.
Ashe.
To those early Homo sapiens, those early Africans who appeared, and many people say, like the Dogon, we came from the Cyrus. Other people say we come from the Milky Way. But wherever we came from, we here. That's what we know, right? We know where we're here. And to them, we say Ashe.
Ashe.
And I'm not going to go through the long sojourn that we went through that populated the earth in every continent, but to those journeyers, those seekers, those travelers, those explorers who've made the earth for what it is, we say Ashe.
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 And I want to make special mention to George Floyd. As you know, this is the 5th year of his anniversary of his transition. And all those whose lives have been erroneously and savagely taken away from us prior to the longevity of those lives. So all those, we wanted to say Ashe.
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 I want to give reference to those African leaders because it was on May the 25th, 1963, that the Organization of African Unity came into existence. And I particularly want to call out the names of Sekou Touré, Modibo Keïto, and Kwame Nkrumah, because they went on to create an African Union, the very same thing that Captain Ibrahim Traoré is attempting to do now in the Sahel. To those African leaders that would begin, the creators of Organization of African Unity, we say Ashe.
Ashe.
We won't be able to do ancestral mathematics today, but we will do it in terms of recognizing them. So now I want you to call all of the names of your family, and we're going to keep calling them, and they hear us. Believe me, they do hear us. So call out those names of your family members.
Shama.
Ashe, Ashe, Ashe,
Alice Hillman,
Ashe,
Martin
Ashe,
Johnson.
Bernard Curtis,
Ashe, Red Oliver, Ashe,
Irene Price.
Mary
and Taylor,
Martin.
Ashe,
Curtis,
Price.
Ellen Burke. Richard Brown.
Anna
Ashe,
Catherine
Michael
Wright.
Gray. Lafayette Jackson.
Ashe,
Anna
Langston
Keisha
Jackson.
Price.
Nelson Thomas, Ashe,
Cornelius
Taisha,
Gray.
Ashe,
Hallelujah.
George
Ashe,
Gray. Jeanette
Ashe,
Gray. Soboy
Ashe, 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 and all those who are unborn or yet to come, and whose shoulders they'll be standing on our shoulders. All those who are yet to come, we say Ashe, Ashe,
Ashe,
Ashe-o.
Asheo, Asheo, Asheo. Beautiful. Asheo, Asheo. Beautiful. I would like to bring to the Zoom stage our founder and elder Griot and President Emerita Enola G. Aird. And if I may, I would like to just read a few words about our founder. Let me just, it's been one of those days. And so if anyone, thank you. So Enola G. Aird is the founder and elder griot of Community Healing Network, the only organization focused exclusively on mobilizing Black people to heal from and extinguish the root cause of global anti-Blackness, the lie of white superiority and Black inferiority. Aird is also co-lead of the Healing Working Group of the Global Circle for Reparations and Healing, in which capacity she conceptualized and helped organize the Circle's 2025 Summit on Centering Healing across Global Africa. Born in Panama of Caribbean heritage, she is a Phi Beta Kappa graduate of Barnard College and earned her law degree at Yale University. It is with great pleasure and great honor that I introduce and I bring to the stage, the Zoom stage again. Everyone calls you doctor, so Dr. Enola Giard.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Chandra. My grandmother used to say that when you encounter obstacles, it is a sure sign that you're doing something important. So this must be extremely important, and we know that it is. We know that this is very important. Happy African Liberation Day, family. Happy African Liberation Day. I am Enola Giard. I am African born in the Republic of Panama, residing in the United States. I am a proud daughter of global Africa, with ancestors hailing from Barbados, Grenada, and Jamaica and Colombia. On my mother's side, I am a great granddaughter of Samuel Alleyne, a dedicated follower of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, to whom I attribute my intense commitment and passion for the emotional emancipation of African people. I join you in the spirit of Ubuntu, Sawubona, and Harambe. And I thank you, Chandra, for this invitation. You know that when you issued the invitation, I responded very, very quickly, without hesitation, because these are frightening times. They demand that we as African people be at our best, at our most empowered, which means that we really do have to be embarking very quickly and very efficiently on a journey towards healing, individually and collectively. So I thank you for your wisdom in calling this convening. I wanted to accept this invitation because I wanted to seize the opportunity to thank God and to thank ancestors for the privilege for me, which has been a privilege of a lifetime, of being a part of and of helping to lead and serve in what has become the global grassroots movement for the healing of African people. You know, it has been more than 500 years. It's been more than 500 years since the Western world became intentionally anti-African, intentionally anti-Black. 500 years since the Portuguese launched the transatlantic trafficking of African human beings, almost 600 years since the popes of the Roman Catholic Church signed papal bulls authorizing the Portuguese monarchy to invade Africa, to, and I quote, subjugate and lead their persons into perpetual servitude. Perpetual servitude. We know that enslavement is as old as humanity itself. The Greeks and the Romans enslaved people, and yes, Africans enslaved other Africans, but the kind of enslavement that was created in the course of the transatlantic trafficking and the European trafficking of human beings is unique in human history. It was justified by a false hierarchy of human value that put Europeans at the very top and Africans at the very bottom, and sometimes not in the human family at all. And this was not just for the period of enslavement. The hierarchy was rooted in and driven by the centuries-old lie of white superiority and Black inferiority. And that lie marked the entire continent of Africa and its people, everything African, everything Black, everything we are, as inferior. The lie was enforced with physical violence and terror. And it was the ideological bulldozer that paved the way for the multi-generational oppression of African people all over the world and the economic exploitation of the African continent from the 15th century until this present moment. It is the lie that inflicted the deepest and longest lasting wounds on the minds, of bodies, and spirits of African people, because it undermined our ability to fully love ourselves and to fully love each other. The lie is at the heart, the very heart of the crime against the humanity of African people. We suffer today, and our ancestors suffered in their time because they were forced into a form of subjugation grounded in a false sense of inferiority that was meant to last forever. And that subjugation has indeed lasted. Because when enslavement ended and when colonization ended, the lie simply endured. It has been passed down through our ancestors to us through the generations, and it will be passed on to our grandchildren unless and until we free ourselves. That is what CHN is about. The lie essentially cast African people out of the circle of humanity, and CHN has since 2006 been building a movement to free ourselves from the lie as a way of reclaiming our rightful place in the circle of humanity. We believe then, and we believe even more now, that healing from the lie is an indispensable foundation for Black wellness and empowerment. In 2020, we declared, without really understanding what it really meant, that 2021 to 2030 would be the decade to defy the lie of Black inferiority and embrace the truth of Black humanity. We announced our intention to work to make this issue, to put this issue at the top of the agenda for African people by the end of the year 2030. And in 2021, CHN was privileged to be one of the 23 organizations chosen to receive a MacArthur Foundation Equitable Recovery Grant. And in addition to the much needed resources, financial resources, it gave me the opportunity to join with the other grantees to form the Global Circle for Reparations and Healing, to support and amplify each other's work. And just 2 months ago, in March, the Global Circle, along with Justice and Repair and the African Union, convened a summit in Ghana, bringing together people across global Africa to focus on the pressing need for healing. And this summit, which I was privileged to co-lead with Dr. Joy DeGruy, was called Centering Healing. And it was premised on the assumption that healing is an essential pathway to power, to spiritual power, psychological and emotional power, which are in turn the pathways to individual, social, economic, and political power. Our Centering Healing Declaration, which will be released by the African Union in the coming days, outlines the concrete steps that the Global Circle will take and encourage others to take in order to help build the global grassroots movement for healing across global Africa, to reverse the conditioning that has been the plight that we have lived with for all these centuries. This is exciting and groundbreaking work. And you know what I really like about this subject of healing? It is the work that we can do all by ourselves. We don't need anybody to help us do it. In fact, it is the work that only we can do. It is work that calls for our agency, our self-reliance, and our self-determination. Healing is indeed the pathway to power, and the working out of our healing for ourselves is what will empower us in and of itself. It is not unusual among those in the movement for the human rights of African people to end speeches by exclaiming, "The struggle continues." But unfortunately, that phrase carries with it the implication that our struggle will go on forever, which psychologically plays right into the hands of those who designed the system of perpetual servitude. So no, I never say the struggle continues. And I instead invite you to join me in saying the struggle is ending, because finally, after 600 years, we African people are ending it by at last freeing ourselves from the lie, by finally healing. What they meant to be perpetual, we are bringing to an end. And not a moment too soon, because our children and our ancestors are waiting. And now I have the privilege of introducing our keynote speaker. He has served our people in many capacities, including as a human rights advocate and diplomat, focused on protecting the rights of refugees and migrants, and as senior advisor to the African Union Commission. He is a global African rooted in Ghana, who's lived in and been educated in Europe. He was the first Black person of African descent to be awarded the highest national medal of honor by the Maltese government for his work on African diaspora engagement in Europe and the integration of African refugees. He is brilliant and he walks the talk as an advocate and an activist for African people. He carries the spirit of Ubuntu, Sawubona, and Harambe. He is the personification of a servant leader, skilled, empathetic, kind, dedicated, caring, with a profound sense of stewardship and a humble and healing spirit. Among my great blessings in being a part of the Global Circle is the opportunity to work with him. And it is my great pleasure to introduce you to my beloved colleague, Dr. Ahmed Zanga Bugre. Dr. Bugre.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Enola, for such a warm introduction. And I send you greetings, all of you, from Ghana. I'm actually speaking from Ghana. I was here this week because we had something at the Ashanti Palace to commemorate the first inaugural awards for arts in Ghana, and also for the return of the culturally rooted properties of the Ashanti Kingdom and the return of those to Ghana. So I'm actually blessed to be joining this meeting from Ghana, from the land of Kwame Nkrumah, and from the place I was born and raised up. I want to thank, first of all, Chandra and the Community Healing Network for inviting me to this very, very important meeting. And as Enola said, I believe in what she has said. The struggle has ended. And I think that this is what Kwame Nkrumah declared on the day of the Ghanaian independence, that the struggle has ended. And I think that this is something that I have just taken note of. We used to say, a luta continua, but I think that we should refrain from saying that. I am honored to be with you today and to share a reflection on the harm that has been caused to Africans and people of African descent. As you may be aware, and as it was said, 62 years ago in Addis Ababa, where I am honored to live and work, the African Union, the 30-odd independent countries at that time came together to fund or to found the Organization of African Unity, because they realized that it was time for the decolonization of the continent and the restoration of the dignity of African people after centuries of colonization and after centuries of the enslavement of African people. One of the things that we have began to discuss about, as you know, this year also is very special, because after 62 years, the African Union has recognized this year, or designated this year, as the year for reparations, which is justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. And I was honored as one of the people to have written the concept note and the roadmap for the theme of the year for the African Union. And one of the things that we were discussing and looked at when we were drafting that paper was the question of healing. As you know, most of the issues surrounding reparations has always been focused on economic harm and the stealing or the deprivation of African development through the transatlantic slave trade, colonialism, neocolonialism, genocide, apartheid, and other things. And that has subjugated the African person to believe that they were born to serve the purposes of the European master. So when we talk about healing, and I was sharing the other day with my dear sister Chandra that for Africans, our harm is different from the people who are descendants of enslaved people. For example, for us in Africa, we don't have the direct harm in terms of psychological harm that people of African descent, especially in America, face, because we have an identity, a root to turn to. I come from the northern part of Ghana, and I come from the Mamprushi tribe, and I come from a town called Boku. I can trace my ancestry back. Wherever I go, I will always say I have a home. And where is that home? That home is Ghana. I don't come from Africa. I am African. I don't see myself as coming from Africa, but I am African. And specifically, I hail from the Mamprushi tribe of the people. And as you can see, when I was growing up in Ghana, whatever we did centered around the conservation of our culture, the identity, and the family. Whatever rituals, whether it was the ritual of a naming ceremony, whether it was a ritual of a baby being born, or whether it was a ritual of someone who has died, everything has to remind you of where you come from and where you belong. And so the idea that somebody has no identity is something foreign to me as a person who is born and raised in Africa. I have lived most of my life, almost all of my life, in Europe. I have faced discrimination, but my sense of who I am and my identity as a person has never been lost, because the harm that Africa suffered during the enslavement of people was an economic harm that was caused. So we always go back to, if you see what the African Union is saying, is the payment of reparations to Africans for the harm caused to Africans. It is never framed within the context of the healing, the psychological harm, and the physical harm that Africans suffered. It is only when you start interacting with African Americans or people who are descendants of enslaved people that you see the severing of that relationship and the harm that was caused as a result of the enslavement of African people. And so today, as we talk about healing, and it's very, very important for us to know that healing is at the center for me on the path to reparations for Africans and people of African descent. When I see an African anywhere, as we were talking about this in Accra, we said that we nod down, we nod, you Americans, you nod up, you look up, and we nod down. There's an affinity that any African person, any Black person I meet, the first thing I say is, how are you, my brother? That is, and there is that connection, the initial connection that binds both the person and myself, because I see this person as a descendant of Africa. I see this person as a global Africa. I see this person as an African, that we have the same identity. We come from the same ancestry. We have the same roots, and that is Africa. And so healing is very, very important. For the African, we have been irreparably harmed by the fact that our culture, our education, our whole legal systems, our institutional frameworks have been replaced. There was this attempt to erase and replace what Africans have with the Western system of doing things. And recently I was listening to a debate on the BBC when there was a debate on colonization and whether it was that colonization was positive or wrong. And these two people were arguing, saying, yes, colonization was proper because colonization brought education to Africa. Without colonization, Africans will not be educated. Now, that's far from the truth. Africans have always had their way of education. And I think that the example, as it was said by my dear Father Baba J, is, you know, in Africa, we don't look at time as in terms of chronology, but you wait for everyone to be present. You know, it doesn't matter how long it will wait, but nothing will start until all the elders have come and sat down to preside whatever is going to take place. It is not a question of we're going to start at 9 o'clock and nobody is there, so everything is cancelled. Because for us from Africa, the idea of a community, the idea of the communal identity is very, very important. It doesn't excuse that, okay, somebody can be late. No, but the focus, the thinking is, I will be where I am because of you. It is in the spirit of Ubuntu that when we gather, we don't look at the outcomes of our gathering based on what I have achieved, but the outcome is the impact of it on us as a community. And therefore, as we are talking about healing, is very, very important. It's very, very important. Why? Because without healing, the relationship between the diaspora and Africans will always be based on mistrust. And we discussed this when we had the summit in Accra, that trust is very, very important. For the African, the concept of trust is your identity with your people. That is, I cannot betray the trust of my people. I cannot, whatever I do is to promote my people. And therefore, trust is the center of the healing that we anticipate in this year of reparations. And I want to just say this also, that the more I listen to African Americans as I interact, that the sense of identity with Africa, especially now as to what is going on in the United States, is questioning more people to say, who am I as the ancestor, or who am I as a person of an African ancestry who has found myself in America? My great-grandparents were shipped as human cargo and sold to other people. But you have been resilient, you've grown. But this link now with Africa must be emphasized. And I will have the privilege of meeting with the presidency of Ghana, who are now having this return program for diaspora to return back. And the question that I was asking the presidency is your policy on return to the motherland based on business opportunities, or is it based on encouraging people to come back home? Is it a touristic thing, or is it identifying these people as being part and parcel of Africa? And finally, I would want to say that within the theme of the year, we're also working that in the African Union, there will be a model law for all the 54 member states of the continent to have a policy framework for the return of all the diaspora back to Africa, that when you identify yourselves as belonging to any country, that you can come back to Africa and you can re-establish yourself back on motherland. This is being discussed as we go on, and therefore the healing element is very, very, very important, that we can begin to trust one another. We can begin to relate with one another as brothers and sisters, and also encourage the return. And for countries like Ghana that have taken the initiative, I think we've also heard that Guinea-Bissau has also taken the same step. Benin is also looking at offering citizenship to people who are on return as well. And therefore, this healing process has already begun in Africa as we go forward. And so I want to once again thank you, Chandra, and your team for inviting me to be a part of this. What I want to leave is just 3 recommendations that we can take forward. That we take this element of healing very important. And I am privileged to work with Dr. Enola within the Global Circle. And we have come to understand that the foundation of our work as African communities worldwide is built on the foundation of healing. Without that healing, it will be difficult for us to be able to have any meaningful reparations. The second element that I also want to emphasize is for us to find opportunities like we are doing today to celebrate together. Let's say like an African Day, to celebrate our identity as Africans and to make sure that we understand that we are the same people. And finally, I believe that it is for us to network in terms of how we can build a community of healers among ourselves and also to reach out to those who are not here. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I will remain online for the conversation to carry forward. And if maybe someone has got any questions as well for me. Thank you so much indeed. I get back to you, Chandra.
Thank you, Dr. Bugre. And I want to encourage everyone that is in our community to begin thinking about questions and things that you would like to ask Dr. Bugre, because we will bring him back, as well as Enola. We will bring them back to have a conversation around a diaspora, a conversation around this healing element, and bringing the two, or bringing all of these, or harmonizing all of the parts of who we are that are scattered. I hate to use that word, but that are scattered around Africa. And so I want to bring down to the Zoom stage, our panelists for today. We're going to take Dr. Bugre's keynote around healing and go a little bit deeper and have a conversation around healing as a pathway to power, economic power, financial power, social power, political power, but healing as the key strategy. And so I would like to bring forth Dr. Obari Cartman. I would like to bring forth our colleague Kwesi Amok, and I'd also like to bring forward Dr. Shelley Harrell to the Zoom stage for us to begin this conversation around healing as a pathway to power. And what I'm going to ask, so after the panel, we are going to have a community conversation. And so again, I want you to be thinking about what questions are bubbling up, what comments are bubbling up, so that we can engage in a very rich and layered conversation. I am going to ask the panelists if you could unmic and let me know that you are here.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. While we get started, before we jump into the panel, I'm going to ask everyone a very simple question. That this is a question that we always ask at CHN, and that is, who are you and who are your people? Dr. Obari, we'll start with you.
Good afternoon, everyone. So grateful to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I am Obari, son of Tabiti and Carla. A child of the diaspora, a student of many brilliant African-centered scholars, have amazing teachers. So anything I say today hopefully represents them well, minimizes me and elevates them. and grateful to be a part of the conversation.
Beautiful. Dr. Harrell.
Greetings, greetings. I am so honored to be here today. I am Shelley Perlerman Harrell. I am the daughter of Laura Alexander Perlerman and Titus Leon Perlerman, the granddaughter and the great-granddaughter and the great-great-granddaughter of some amazing human beings who have been models to me of resilience and pride and community. I have uncles and aunts and related by blood and related by kinship that surrounded me in community and love. And I am just in gratitude for being able to have the opportunity that they have all given me to be here today. And to do the work that is so important and so necessary for us as a people. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And my brother, Kwesi Amok.
Yeah, so yes, I'm Kwesi, currently based in the northern part of Ghana, very close to Burkina Faso. It's just like 30 minutes drive from here, even less, and I'll be in Burkina Faso. Yeah, I have been inspired and by one of my mentors, Ayi Kweyama. I hope to meet him in a few days' time. I'm due to travel to Senegal. I was with him a couple of years ago, so I'm hoping to spend more time with him when I go this time. I mean, he's inspired me a lot in many ways. I have been blessed to have a lot of wonderful teachers, of course, apart from my UK, a lot of other teachers in the community where I am now. This is my ancestral land. And the Busas are among a group of persons who are among the enslaved. You know, in the slavery literature, you find that there were actually slave raiders who had attempt of basically exterminating people from here. And so they formed resistant movements. And so it's a land of both trauma and how they've dealt with that trauma in many different creative ways. So as part of my work as a PhD doctoral student, I decided to apprentice as a blacksmith, which is something that I'm almost done with. But of course, the work continues in that regard. I'm a storyteller. I love to write. I love to dance. I love to sing. And yeah, I love to connect with the ancestors in a way of also connecting with the unborn. So I believe I belong to all of you, and I belong to a vast community of Africans who have come and who are yet to come.
So beautiful. I just want to let everyone know that I did try to get Kwesi to sing for us. And so next time, next time, he will not only sing for us, but he will compose something for us. He just found that out now. And so we look forward to it, Kwesi. So
no comment, Chandra.
So we had the honor of attending the Centering Healing Summit in Ghana, where this conversation started. And so I would like for the three of you to just go around, and I want you to respond to healing as a pathway to power. I know that there are a lot of strategies out there for us of what we need to do in this historic moment. And healing for us is a very important part, and dare I say, a central role in that strategy. And I'd love to hear your perspective, your response to that.
Where do we start?
Yes, let's start backwards. Let's go with Kwesi.
Okay, so I'll tell a story that I'm familiar with. I believe it would be perhaps a pathway to emotional well-being, or it depends on how that, I mean, we'll get there. But it's a story that I'm familiar with, so I'll tell that. I mean, I like to look at grand narratives and big stories, right, in terms of who we are and what we've done. I mean, a few weeks ago, I was with my colleagues from the Africa America Institute to go to Namibia. And Namibia is special to us because the Africa America Institute, through its scholarship programs, produced 2 presidents for Namibia, including the famous, the last one, well, Pan-African, is Hage Geingob, and the one who came after him. We produced a prime minister and several others. So we had to go there to continue with that relationship. But one of the key things we learned from there has to do with the trauma caused by the Germans. You know, there was a whole attempt to exterminate the Hereros and the Nama. And after that, the whole thing was covered for almost a century before people even started getting to know about it. So there are layers of all of that. And what happened was some of the soldiers who were involved in that, you know, genocide in Namibia actually ended up in Germany and were involved in what happened with concentration camps. So more like what happened in Namibia was a rehearsal for what was going to happen later. So that's been linked. Some of the soldiers, the names have all been done. Now, this is a grand narrative. You can, you know, look at it from different perspectives, but there are also the micro, right? The micro narratives of our existence and what we do. And I think sometimes we need to pay more attention to that. So I'll tell one story of something I know. So I lost my mom quite early. I had the blessings of having mothers. 2 of them have always served as my mothers. So I could go to their homes. I mean, I stayed there, like, anywhere, right? So they are children. I have my sisters and brothers, you know, and one of my sisters from one of my adopted mothers is currently in the US. And her son was diagnosed with, you know, ADHD. And there was a problem, I'm sure, perhaps because of his level of energy. It was purely diagnosed that he had attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, right? And so he was put on medication, you know. He was put in a special school, like with persons with disabilities, more or less, like, you know, kind of challenging ways of learning. And it was troubling this sister of mine. So she decided to send my nephew, my adopted nephew, to Ghana for 6 months. Now, this boy comes, and my mother realized that the extent of energy that he had, and I really would want us to look at this, and I'll ask my question when I'm done. It's very similar to the other grandchildren in the house, right? My other sister here from that home has about 4 children, and one of them is just full of energy, right? So she couldn't understand why this boy has to be on pill before he had to sleep. So the first thing she did, of course, she is a retired educator and social worker, well-trained, did all of that. So she decided that she was not going to give him, right, of course. That's, I mean, him on the antidepressant, whatever it was, right? So it was a challenge. First day, she just watched her, stayed awake for several hours. Eventually, he went to bed. The following day, repeated. By the end of the week, my nephew was sleeping at the time that all the others were sleeping. The other thing that had to happen, of course, was with food. When he came, all he was taking was pepperoni, and he wasn't eating any other food. So there had to be some resetting in that regard. Bit by bit. By the time we got to the 3rd month, everything, he would go to school, come back, follow everything, do everything. At the end of the 6 months, This young man was eating the normal food here, eating the fufu, eating the banku, and all of that, right? From just being hooked on pepperoni and the chicken and all that, and moving on to having a variety of diets, and then also completely shifted from this, hyperactivity and that label without any medication. Of course, there was care, there was a lot of attention, there was a lot of patience. He went back to the States and they were shocked after the 6 months. This boy would wake up, prepare breakfast, take it to his mother. This boy would do things, would wash his dishes, would do everything that, 11, 12-year-old boy would do. And of course, he had to be taken out of the special education classroom within 6 months. Now, my question is, we have two questions here. Are there socio-cultural determinants of health that we may have to pay a lot more attention to, especially as Black people? I know Obari does a lot of work in this regard. I know Shelley does a lot of work in this regard. And I know the network is doing that. But how do we bring that as, alternative to the mainstream? Because imagine the many young people, Black boys with similar levels of energy who have been diagnosed, right? And that's the next question. What can we do to put in the work to be able to also do the diagnosis that we need to do for ourselves? Because the frameworks obviously were not made for us, for our well-being. How can we get out of that? Because in the end, we may end up reinforcing more harm. So this is just a micro story to be able to tease out these questions. So thank you very much. And I'll hand over to Obari and Shelley to take over from there. Thank you. Sandra, you're muted.
What's really very beautiful that I like about here is it started with a false narrative about this young boy and how that then played out into a misdiagnosis. And so on the social and cultural level, and it goes back to something that Dr. Bougre mentioned about the Europeans thinking that Africans they needed to be educated, a false narrative that then set them into motion, that created what we now have to deal with today. And so we think about the danger of false narratives. And there's something that we teach in our emotional emancipation circles, that we look to our own for what is good, normal, and right about us. And how do we pull out or heal from the internalized narratives that may cause us to participate in things that are not good for us? Dr. Shelley Harrell.
Thank you, and thank you, Kwesi. I'm a psychologist, so I got all kinds of things happening right now. But I wanna, as I was preparing just some thoughts for today, and this idea of healing as the pathway to power. What kind of came to me was this maybe reframing that just a bit to healing as a pathway to a healed relationship with power, right? So healing as a pathway to a healed relationship with power. And I think, when we talk about decolonizing power, we need to unpack how we are carrying power and how the kind of colonizer, trafficker, enslaver way of using power is power as domination, right? Power as acquisition. And power in and of itself is energy, right? It's an energy with action potential. We could go way deep into power and energy. So we're just gonna put a pin in that. But power, we don't have to use power or understand power in that way, right? So we want to think about power over right? That colonizing way of understanding power that has manifested in all the atrocities that have already been mentioned, the trafficking of African peoples, the enslavement, genocides, we could go on and on, apartheid, etc. So moving away from power over, and these are not ideas that I originated. Others have talked about different ways of orienting to power, but they just came up for me as I was reflecting on this topic of healing as a pathway to power. So when we are unhealed, we risk using power in ways that reflect our disconnection from the true meaning of power, right? Culturally, communally, and who we are. So we want to move away from power over and move towards power from, right? Power to, power of, power with, power within. We want to decolonize power away from power over and power as dominance. And so all of these all manner of atrocities have disconnected us from the source of our power, which is collective, which is communal, which is cultural, right? These atrocities have disconnected us from how we use our power, right? So we need to interrogate, how are we using our power? How are we understanding power? How can we replenish and activate our power? What zaps and takes us away from our power? Right? So all of these ways that oppression and colonization have disconnected us from our power. And so healing is also about reclaiming that power, right? Reclaiming the power from, which is the power of resistance. And we have throughout history examples of power of resistance, the power of resistance. Right? How we can heal and restore power to resist the lie of Black inferiority. And it's so insidious, right? That lie of Black inferiority is so insidious. Sometimes we don't even know how it is exerting its power for us mentally and emotionally and relationally, right? And so another way of thinking about our decolonizing of power is the power to, right? That's the power of liberation, the power of agency, the power of action. One of the disconnections of oppression is how it depletes and exhausts and distracts us, right? So that power to, right? That power to act. We're laid out, exhausted, distracted, depleted. It's hard. And so that reconnection to our power to, power with, we know the power of the collective. I want to also just speak to, and I know we don't have time, so I'm going to wrap up really quickly here, is the power of, right? So power doesn't exist in a cultural vacuum, right? This energy, how this energy is used has something to do with cultural values, epistemologies, ethics, that reflect what fuels the power, what determines how we use the power. So the power of is the quality, what's determining the quality of the energy and the energy that fuels the power. So we think about the values, valuing the dignity, worth, and humanity of people. Power over dehumanizes, right? It disconnects us from the humanity of people. So the power of, right? The power of love, the power of interconnectedness, the power of Ubuntu. Right. So just again, unpacking, decolonizing, and recognizing how insidious it is the way we may have internalized and act out and enact power that replicates in ourselves, in our relationships, individual relationships globally, right? And then that power within. And we know the principle of interconnectedness, that when we start shifting power one place, it reverberates and power begins to shift and healing begins to happen. Healing is not just internal. We heal at all levels and it all is connected. So healing a person, healing an organization, healing a community, right? All reverberates throughout all of that. So those are some of the things that started to just kind of percolate with this topic, but healing our relationship with power. Healing our relationship with power. Yeah, thank you.
Beautiful. The only thing I'm going to say that that brought up for me, it brought up many things, is also the language of power, how we even talk about it. What does healed language around power look like? Dr. Obari.
I love this conversation. So insightful from all the speakers so far. I also want to make sure we're giving ourselves grace as we wrestle with the definitions and understandings of power, because we're doing that in the context that that adversary that sees power as dominant still exists. It's still very active and organized, and is still attempting to hold their place in these societies. And so, as we are developing and cultivating the power of love, we can't do that in the same vacuum that ignores the fact that we are also under attack while we're healing. I love this gathering. It's just a healing space, just to be with, the family from the diaspora. I think embedded in just the framework of the Community Healing Network is the answer to the question that Dr. Harrell presents. Dr. Nola started with, we're transforming from the lie of white superiority to the truth of Black humanity, not Black superiority. That's not the opposite. The opposite is of inferiority is superiority, it's humanity. Embedded in the framework of the Emancipation Circles is this idea that we are wrestling with this idea of what does it mean to be powerful and not have it be from an oppressive condition. I used to also struggle with Dr. Bougray's point about being we used to call ourselves the lost tribe and did not have a place to call home. Like I used to have a lot of sadness about not being able to trace my place back to a specific place on the continent to say, this is who I am, this is where I come from. And that identity confusion, I think for a lot of Africans in the diaspora, causes a lot of mental disconnect. And as I have really wrestled with that, and we're doing the DNAs and we get to see like the charts and there's something that happened that was very healing for me as I thought about not having a specific place to pinpoint, but also having several different sites of location swimming in my blood. Like I have a birthright access to parts of East, West, and South Africa in my DNA in this moment. And as I reconceived that as a superpower, as a meta-analysis, as a not a trauma, but as a power in and of itself, it allowed me to appreciate gatherings like this where we're doing libations and saying Ashe in the Yoruba language. We reference Harambe in Swahili. We're talking Ubuntu in South Africa, and combining all of those things to create something new, which is what the African American is in lots of ways. And there's a lot of trauma in that, but there's also a new perspective, a new analysis, a new art, culture, jazz, a new hip hop, a new soul food, a new creation that allows for healing possibilities to now re-engage in the conversation with our brothers and sisters on the continent to offer something that has not been conceived of yet. That's not just trauma. It's not just defeat. There's also a victory in the reframing of looking for power in the connection. And I think this gathering represents that. And I love just the connection to healing with power as a concept, because we have to really resist very hard the mental health momentum that's encouraging us to just be mindful and deep breathe and feel good and be more efficient cogs in the machine ultimately designed to devour us. And so that's what we were trained to do. We were trained to get people to cope and manage with a sick system and diagnose people as individually wrong or broken, and not looking at the context as being deficient in and of itself. And so this gathering represents that healing power, the connective power, and the new possibilities that emerge when we reframe ourselves as not broken, but remixed, right? As reconfigured with new possibilities, new eyes, new lenses. So as I struggled with not being a lost child, but being found new, a new tapestry of a combination of African lineages inside of myself, it allowed me to stand up with a little more dignity than the shame. So there was a healing power in just all of the reframing that happens in conversations like this. But we have to spread this. This has to be something that's not so isolated. This has to be a part of the training, the education, the conversations. When we go to the panels, all the healing is self-care. All the healing is just like calm and relax. It's hard to do so. Like that I believe is a post-war analysis. In the midst of attack, we still have to think about what does the power mean to resist and to decolonize, but also wrestle with decolonize. Decolonize means it's not colonial no more, but we already have answers to what it is. Like decolonize means that's not what it isn't, but what it is, it has always been African. It's always been ours. It's always been what we've always done to connect, to survive, to love. We just have to claim that, give ourselves permission to have the legitimacy of the expertise that becomes the place from which we diagnose, we heal, we connect, and not even entertain what they have tried to brainwash us with, but to really set and settle with our own power that we never needed anybody's permission to exercise.
Yeah, can I just say that as Barry and Shirley went out, I kept thinking about something Sajifo Kwame Nkrumah said, that I am not an African because I was born in Africa, because Africa is born in me.
Right.
And I just will offer that for us to reflect more on in terms of what does that mean? We can unpack that, but in reality, that's a very deep statement. And if you look at the examples we spoke about Nod, in which Dr. Bugri spoke about, you meet somewhere in the UK, you're not downwards, right? In the US, you're not upwards. There's something that connects us wherever we are. And that for me is what Shirley spoke about, the power of relationality. And that is something that is unbroken. No matter what we've been through, and that's what has brought us here. And that is the relationship we have, and when you talk about a community, and that's why it's important to look at it from this perspective of a community that cares. It's not really even those who are alive, it's the ancestors who have come and gone, and we really have to center the ancestors in our conversation. That's why I was so happy that we started with the libation and everything. It's a different framework. It's a different framework of being, of doing things. And if we can do more of these things, we will keep developing more practices and rituals of being, of doing things, and that is healing, right? We just behave, we just look at the systems and do what we have to do, but that's our power. We are related, not just to those of us who are alive, but we are related to, a vast community of those who have come before us and are here with us, have a normative power with us, and for the unborn, generation. And I think when we open ourselves up to that vastness of a community, we are powerful in ways that no one can even define in terms of that. Exactly. And because we are a community, we commune with, that's it. And I'm who I am is not because I'm here alone. I'm with all of you. I just wanted to offer that in terms of my reflections on what you've been saying. So thank you so much. Thank you, Shirley. Thank you, Barry. And thanks, Ahmed, for the comments.
There are a couple of things that come to mind. Go ahead. Yes. Go ahead, Dr. Harrell. Go ahead. Yes, please. Yes, jump in. Yes, please. Yes.
Just real quickly around this issue of self, right? Self-care, self-healing. And I think we need to decolonize that as well. So when I use the term decolonizing, I'm talking about both kind of pieces of that, both the naming of what happened, right? The recognition, the illumination, making it very clear, and the reclamation, right? The reclamation and restoration of what has been severed as Dr. Bougre was saying. And so when we look at self, not as individual, but self as a collective construct, right? Self is all that has come before me. Self is descendants. Self is community. I carry my current community in myself, right? Dr. Naeem Akbar wrote a book called Community of Self, like many years ago, right? The idea of self. So when I think about self-care, if I'm even doing something like my meditation, right? That is not in the service of just calm. I high five to Brother Obari. It's not just so we can calm down. It's so we can clear space, so we can become aware, so that we can see, so that we can recognize and pull back from all the distraction and things that take us away from truth, that take us away from seeing clearly, right? So self-care, I think we can say it's okay to engage in self-care and to engage in self-healing, because we carry more than individual in our conception of self.
Absolutely. We are going to continue this conversation. I'm going to pull in Dr. Bougre. I'm really anxious to hear what you have to say. And we're going to pull in Enola as well. And I've asked people to start putting your questions in the chat. If you could help us recognize them with a large Q, a semicolon, or large Q, colon, and then your question. But I think I really want to begin having a more layered conversation. I want to bring in something that Obari said. This is the tension that we do have to really wrestle with, and that is we are being attacked. And so we have to be really careful we have to be prepared for that and have a strategy with that, as we are also rebuilding our relationships with each other, not just within our own regional context, but even the diaspora. And so having this multi-pronged approach, because one of the things that I see I see readily is this need to make us dependent. One of the things that people have a very hard problem with is African, Black, and power in the same language. Like literally, as we've been having these conversations in and around the US, I have literally had people say, that power thing, yeah, you might want to choose a different word. It's like, oh, what is that about? Because we're going to double down on power, because there's a very real goal that we have. There's a very real goal, and something that Dr. Bougre said to me weeks ago in our conversation that I still keep in my heart is that the future of Africa is global Africa, and the future of global Africa is Africa. The future of Africa is global Africa, and the future of global Africa is Africa. And there are very tangible things that we are being called to do. And to your point, Dr. Obari, it's not just to kind of feel well, have our green juice in the woods and, kumbaya. There are very tangible things, and we are going to continue to be attacked. And so how do we do this work together? I just want to bring forth this quote by Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King that really is spearheading this conversation, that power without love is reckless. We definitely need love. Power without love is reckless, and love without power is sentimental and anemic. Power at its best is love. Power at its best is love, implementing the demands of justice. And I just want to, before I pass that, I just want to also plant the seed that we can do what we need to do. We don't need permission. We can create it. We can create what we need. It can look like what we need and evolve it as we need it. So please, before we get really excited, Dr. Bougre, Enola, please jump in. And yes, Dr. Harrell and And Cartman and Kwesi, please jump in, and I will read questions from the chat as well as they come up.
Maybe if I may jump in, and in hearing the words that we were discussing in terms of power, and I like what you said, power is love. And I think I like what Dr. Harrell said, that the definition of the self in the community, this is very central to African communal living, which was taken away from us. And I can just tell you an example within the institutional framework that we have. Why is African institutions so fragile and so failing? Because the systems that were created within our communities does not respond to our traditional ways of doing things. So for example, at the African Union, people have a tendency to criticize that nothing gets done because it is being done at the African Union level. It's not by vote, but it's consensus. And sometimes it's to say, oh, sister, you know, and they use these terms to describe, although they are representing sovereign states. And sometimes you can see that when you have the idea of a sovereign nation, which is a foreign issue, Africans are not monolithic people. If you take a DNA of an African person, they come from everywhere, because Africa was shaped by migration. Our language extends from east to west. So if you find a person who is, you can never find a person who is from Ghana whose DNA does not trace back to, let's say, South Africa or even to Cameroon or Congo, because most of our people, they shaped Africa by moving, and they moved in communities. They moved in terms of this whole idea of power came in. This definition of what power is came in with the European, who came in to give salt, who came in to give guns. And, you know, Africans, yes, they fought among each other. But you can see, as Akwesi have said, even intermarriages. My grandfather was the chief of our city, and my grandfather had 20 wives. And the reason being that he married from all the neighborhoods, from all the other people who were part of his kingdom, let me say in that way, because if I become your in-law, I don't fight you anymore. I might fight you, but when we have become family, I don't fight you. It's not in terms of, I'm not here propagating polygamy and stuff. No, but I'm giving you the I am sharing the principle. Why do we call each other in-laws? Why do we call each other brothers? Because if I'm able to share you on the same table, then we've become family. And so the concept of power being something that dominates, was not part of our African culture, and it's not a. You can see that in terms of conflict resolution and mediation issues, when people enter into conflict, you would always see that it has to do with power. But when they sit down to mediate, they would say, oh, we are coming to you as my brother. I'm coming to you as your relative. I have been to meetings, let's say, in South Sudan, where we've sat down and we will just break kola nuts, or we will share pour libation, and the tone of the whole meeting will change, although it's an official meeting. But when you are able to invoke the ancestors, when you are able to pour libation, and you look at one another in the eyes and say, I am here not to demand what you should do, but I'm here as a brother to mediate so that we can make peace among ourselves. The conversation changes. And those are African traditional methods which exude power. But when we took on the principles of Western mediation, it doesn't work in Africa. And that is why we are trying to decolonize even the way we do things, the parliamentary system, the voting system. Because if you do not take care of the other people and you put literally the Western form of voting, it doesn't work. And so we have now found that even through reparations, we are now introducing the concept of the Afrocentric way of leading, where you have got, let's say in Ghana, now you have got the Council of State that brings in leaders who are wise to advise the president as to what he has to do. These are not constitutional issues, but they become part of the decision-making practices of Ghana. So the communal identity, the love, and I'm saying this because you said power comes from love.
Beautiful. Anyone else before I go to the chat? Yep.
This is so wonderful. It's just wonderful to be here. I've just been taking notes and just soaking everything in. And Chandra and everybody at CHN knows that I relate to communicate through the wisdom of our elders, the wisdom of quotations. And as I listen to this conversation, two come to mind. One is Arna von Tom's, is there something we have forgotten wandering in these strange lands? And the answer is yes, it's everything about who and whose we are. And this healing conversation is about how we remember those things, how we begin to together remember those things. And the other quote is not by an ancestor, but by someone, and not an elder either, but a very young man who we met on our Global Truth tour in 2020. And it was a young man in Omaha, Nebraska, in the Malcolm X Center, who said, his name was Dr. Mani, and he said, we Africans embody in our very incarnation the struggle for the definition of what it means to be human. And that is what we are about here, trying to recover, reconnect with the definition of what it means to be human, and in the African sense, and I would argue in the fullest sense, because I think the journey that we've been on, wandering in these strange lands, is taking us to the definition of humanity that says it's about it's about I only, and it's about my power over, my power to dominate, my power to use other people as instruments to make money. And that seems to be the main reason for being, versus the being of the way of understanding humanity that is grounded in Ubuntu and Sawubona and Harambee. And it's just really wonderful that we as an African people seem to be turning in that direction, away from the we, away from the I to the we. That's all I'll say at this moment.
Beautiful. We have three. Go ahead, Dr.
I'll
Barr.
say something real quick. I think that it's important that we also give ourselves a little more credit sometimes. I don't think that we forgot everything. I think that we retained a lot.
You are right.
I think that there's no other explanation for us still being here, still loving ourselves, still reaching back. Like,
yeah,
you
are completely correct. Yes, and it's what's saving us and what we're holding
that's
on.
What's saving us right now.
We've been holding on all
Right.
along. It's been saving us all along. You are right.
Absolutely.
Thank you for that corrective.
Dr. Harrell.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Obari, for that, because I think that when I think about the idea of reconnection, or what we have forgotten, reconnecting, it's already there, right? It's already there. And so there's a forgetting, but there's also, it's that disconnection. And so it is a accessing something that is within us already. So I love that you're saying, you know, we haven't forgotten everything. We just need healing strategies to access what is there already. And the other thing I wanted to comment on about what you were sharing, Dr. Obari, is I love music metaphors. And so this idea of the remix, right? And when I think about, you know, reconnection, and those aspects of Sankofa around reclamation and restoration, it's not just about going back and retrieving, it's also the revitalization piece, right? So there's something we create, there's some agency in what we create from bringing the past into the present in the service of the future. And so that the idea of the remix, I'm feeling that, and I'm gonna yeah.
No, real
So
quick
thank you
again.
for
I
that.
think the harder part about this conversation for me has always been encouraging young people to go back to a glorious days of pre-colonial Africa. And then they're like, but it seemed like they lost. It seemed like there was something about what happened then that did not work. And that's what part of the wrestling with the evolution is becoming something that will not lose again, so that we can not get to a place where we can be so susceptible to such a weak foreign enemy ever again. And that means we got to shore up some things and not just go back and repeat them, but to evolve and recreate.
Two things that come to mind, and I'm thinking about that we being diasporic, that we being a diasporic we. And one of the things that we talked about in the summit was healing, harmony, and Harambe. And so we think about Africa and the diversity within Africa on the continent, and the diversity of global Africa and all these perspectives and all these different experiences. The question, how do we harmonize into, Dr. Harrell, creative power, the power to create? There's a question in the chat, a couple of questions in the crowd. One from Njeri about, are we redefining healing as access to power? I'm going to jump in and say, actually, for me, it's about, to your point, Dr. Farrell, it's already in us. It's about healing to harness the power that we have, because we are leaking it in so many ways, one of them being our wounds. But I will take some feedback, pushback from our panelists. That's one question. Dr. Bougray, someone is wrestling, and this is great, someone is wrestling with this idea that Africans are not dealing with psychological trauma from colonialization, just the economic piece. But when you take a look at the continent and you're seeing skin bleaching creams and things like that, and whitening creams, they're just sort of wrestling with that idea that there wasn't psychological trauma to the Africans, just economic piece. I want to throw that in there. And then there's another question in the chat I need to get some clarity on, but we can start with those two things. But the one thing before we do is I want to use a definition from Aikwe Armah, and Anola, you can help me out with this, is that we here are minds that refuse to die under the European invasion and colonization. We refuse that, and that power, I saw it so clearly when I was in Ghana, the African spirit that refuses to die, refuses to lay down, even though it has this economic, sociological, psychological, social knee on its neck. We refuse to die. So I just threw a lot at the panelists, and so I will I will let you respond. Dr. Bougray, go. Or Kwesi.
Maybe I can
Or Kwesi.
come
Or Kwesi. Either one. Either
Go
one.
ahead.
My elder brother should go first.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
My in-law.
Thank you. Just clarify the whole. I think it's a question of degrees of impact. There cannot be a denial that Africans have been harmed, and harm can be both psychological but also economical. But what I mean by African harm is that, you see, when Africans were enslaved and taken away, when you look at younger generations, we far removed from it. We don't even know who was taken. And the stories were not told. For many in our educational system, the enslavement of Africans was not told. It was romanticized. You know, in terms of the castles that are in Ghana, you go there and it's romanticized. And recently someone said these castles that have become like money-making machines are actually crime scenes where people were brutally, raped and, inhumanly treated and shipped like human cargo. So in our educational system, we were the Western system of education was replaced to us. Let's say English or French. But the harm that was caused was in terms of the fact that we in Africa still see the harm caused to Africa in terms of economics and development. The institutions that were created as a result of colonization was there to extract from Africa until today. It is what has crippled Africa. So when we frame the language of reparations in Africa, in many, many times, the element of compensation is amplified because we have been robbed of our raw materials. Our countries are in debt. There's no development going on. Our institutions are dependent on the global institutional systems. For example, in the UN, Africa has no representation in the Security Council. And yet, African governments form the majority of the UN system. So Africa is now saying, no, we need reform. We need reform of the UN systems. We need reform of the financial institutions that have been able to use to bring Africa to its knees. So the issue of mental colonization, of course, is there because our educational system, we were kind of programmed in the Western way. Our institutions, our legal systems, you can see our judges, they're still wearing clothes like in the UK, they wear wigs in the heat. So the mental harm was not who is the African in me, because we remained on the mainland. We still had the connection to our ancestral land, to our ancestral places. So when we discuss on reparation or harm, we tend to look at it in economic terms. For example, if I see an African American, when I was a child, I would say Americans. I can, by way of skin color. But in Africa, you relate to people based on tribe.
I'm sorry, can you go back one more
Culture.
sentence? You said something I wanted to hear. You got a little bit choppy just
Sorry?
2 sentences ago. When you saw African Americans, you thought what? We couldn't hear you. You got choppy for a quick second.
I thought they were African. I thought they were Americans.
Oh, okay.
Most people in Africa who see African Americans, they will say that they are Americans. Why? Because they cannot relate to them. The relational aspect is missing. And this is where the healing piece is very, very important. Because in our history and in our educational system, we were never connected to those who were enslaved and taken away. In our history, it was erased. So that is why sometimes when I hear conversations about African Americans who are descendants of enslaved African people and the African diaspora who migrated into America or into other countries, there is a distinction between the two. Most Africans who migrate for economic reasons, but they have a link with the country from where they are leaving. They have that link. So when they come to America, maybe the relationship between them and African Americans becomes difficult because they become your point of identity as Africans is different. He is saying, I am here because of economics. So I am willing to kind of go alongside with whoever can give me. I'm willing to go with, if he wants to, but I'm not willing to suffer like you have done. So what's the issue? So the harm is different. I'm not saying that Africans have not been harmed psychologically, but our harm is indirect. Whilst I believe and I think that the harm caused to African Americans has been direct because they have been that their grandparents were taken away and dismembered from the continent. And we were kind of not taught about them at all. If you had to ask me about the history, until I grew up and I went to law school, I knew nothing about the suffering of African Americans and what happened to African Americans when they left Africa. It was even until recently that I will even connect that with the Caribbean or South America, because the Europeans made sure that they erased, that they put a chasm between the continent and those who were enslaved. And that came through our educational system. So when you hear Africans talk about reparations, and in terms of, they don't fight in terms of their Africanness, they fight in terms of give us back what you took away from us. And that is mainly point in economic terms. So that was the point that I was trying to raise, not minimize the harm caused psychologically.
Yeah, so thank you so much, my big brother. I will just say that, well, the miseducation is been there. The dismemberment of even those on the lands of Africa geographically is also there, because we're still dealing with borders. Impose families that live across that cross. I mean, I'm just telling you, you have families that just cut across from so-called imposed, territories, right? And that in itself is a form
Kwesi, if you can hear us, you have frozen, so we cannot hear you.
Oh, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
That's better. We can hear you now. Can you repeat
Can
what
you
you
hear me?
said?
Okay. So I said that the processes of colonially inherited systems of education actually also reinforce a lot of harm until sometimes we become aware. So when you have a lot of these families crossing borders without anybody checking their passports and everything, we're still sitting in places like the African Union and have all kinds of debates still. But we have been dismembered. And my hope is that the more we connect with our brothers and sisters across the different spaces around the world, we'll realize the extent to which we have been dismembered. It's not just a dismemberment of others, and I mean our brothers in other places because they were moved from the land, but even those on the land, we've been severely dismembered, and that's what we need to get back to. That's where the work also has to happen. Move beyond these artificial colonially imposed borders. But that's just some idea. But I would really love to hear from some of our sisters and brothers present in this room, listening mostly to us and typing in, beyond this panel. I think that if I have anything else to say, I'll shelve that for now. But to say thank you, I've seen Dr. Babaji talking about nosology and the question
Yes.
that had raised, and I've seen Obari bringing forth some material that has been, which is beautiful. And I think that this is what we can continue doing in terms of gathering resources to be able to, tell our story, go beyond our miseducation and our misdiagnosis to be able to actually really educate, to liberate our inner, strengths with who we are as a community. So thank you. And I would love to hear from our brothers and sisters present, not as panelists, but, in this space. Thank you.
Absolutely. One of the things I would like to throw out is that, or add to the conversation, is that part of the conference was figuring out or starting the process of building out a global infrastructure of healing, which, as I am listening to that, to that question on nosology, is that it adds the various layers of, the various layers of healing that we can think through, more on the medical side, but also on the emotional side as well. It just is another piece for us to grapple with as we think about that, and what we need this infrastructure to be for us. And I would even put forth in a very decolonized but African-centered way. I know we started late because of technical difficulties and we are over time, and I want to be respectful of people's time and day. And so I did ask if we could have a few more minutes, but if there is anything else, I think the one thing I want to bring up is this idea of being dismembered. That's a very, very, very powerful image. And it does very much link to a lot of what I've said, but in particular, Dr. Shelley Harrell around disconnect. And it takes disconnect even to an even deeper idea in the sense of like the absence of a member, the absence of a limb, and thinking about the process of trying to not just reconnect, but reassemble. How, when we think about healing, how do we reassemble ourselves diasporically? What does that even look like? And question, like, where do we begin to reassemble ourselves? Baba Onoje has his hand up. Baba J, excuse me, Onoje has his hand up.
Blessings, thank you. This has been phenomenal. And I would ask that we make this at minimum a quarterly convening. This can't be just a celebration. It's not. I know you're not doing that anyway, but I don't know if you have already set a calendar for us to say every 3 months we're going to meet like this and start to have committees that's going to look at the various levels of nosology in terms of the culture of the nosology, public health systems, right? Individual therapy, sister, Shelley Harrell is going to be with NCOBRA in June when we wind up ending the education hall piece of Year to Heal. I put some information in the chat. Hope people would register and start to continue those conversations. Come with us, join with us, those conversations that we are having at NCOBRA. So this is phenomenal. I'm loving every single word of it. But now we have to be organized. Mari Evans says, if you make people mystified, dependent, subordinate, and powerless, you colonize them. So we have a pretty good stuff in the first level in terms of demystification. But the second level in terms of self-reliance, that's where we have to now create a power base where we demand to all these colonial structures that, no, this is how our people needs to be. I don't even know what shouldn't be diagnosed. It should be some other word, healing, whatever it is. But we now have to create the power base that we can get remunerated for the services that we're providing. And I think that's the next step. I'm complete. Thank you.
Thank you. Oops. Sorry about that.
I just wanted to say, Chandra, we do need to be organizing and routinizing and creating the infrastructure at each level, and wanted to invite Dr. Brugre is our coordinator, to invite people to go to the Global Circle for Reparations and Healing website. And if it appeals to you, to join us in the Healing Working Group, which Dr. Joy DeGruy and I co-lead, because that is the purpose of that that enterprise to really do the work and to assemble the people and the resources necessary to create a global infrastructure, recognizing that there needs to be local infrastructures, et cetera. But the key is that we continue to talk with each other on a very regular basis. And I was just about to write to Chandra that exactly what you said, Dr. Onaje. Absolutely. It has to be routinized. We need to be meeting regularly.
Perfect. Perfect. We lost Kwesi. Where are you? But I am for the
I'm
sake,
here.
you're here. I cannot find you. For the sake of time, we are going to have to bring our conversation to a close. To your point, we will. These conversations, I think I agree, Dr. Onaje, that we definitely need to have more conversations on a more regular basis, not just for one particular thing, but for a more diasporic conversation around this idea of healing and reassembling ourselves for the future. And so what I would like to do, for the sake of time, I am not going to do my presentation. Please, we have a mailing list called Flourishing While Black in the program. There's a link, and if you want to keep up to date to the next phase of CHN and what we will be doing as we continue our work both locally and globally, we will definitely be sending updates for that. What I'd like to do is bring Dr. Enid Gaddis, please excuse me for mispronouncing your name, Enid Gaddis, to close us out with her poem, which is so appropriate, and that is that we don't need permission. And I would like for those words to really, for us to drink in those words and really think about how we move forward from this day forward. This is just the beginning. This is not the end. And so before we bring up Enid, are there any closing thoughts, Dr. Bugray, Dr. Cartman, Kwesi, Anola? Are there any closing thoughts that you would like to leave in the Mbangi before we depart, before we move on?
I just want to say one quick thing. I was really inspired by what Brother Kwesi had me thinking about as the pathway towards continental healing. That there's divides that the European came and carved up and put artificial boundaries, and they're still infighting and conflicts. And that instead of focusing on internal healing, which is a part of it, to reach out to the diaspora, to have these conversations inspires everyone to think about what does it really mean to be human and African, and to ignore the attempts to divide and conquer us by coming together and expanding across language, across space, across time. It gives us a different foundation from which to come together through. So just that idea of a diaspora healing Africa is something that's really inspiring to me. So I think this is the work that's doing that. So thank y'all for doing it, for having me, and I look forward to the next one.
Anyone else?
Chandra,
Yes.
Chandra, if I may say so too, I think that this conversation that we are having is very important because it's the root, it's the foundation of the healing process. When we open up to one another in conversing, when we're able to know where we're coming from, we're able to kind of draw ourselves closer. So thank you for putting up this, and especially on this very important day, 25th of May, when our leaders gathered to chart a way forward for the continent. And after 62 years, they have now seen that the diaspora is a very key, important part in the development of Africa, not just in physical development of Africa, but also the human-to-human relationship that we have. So thank you so much, and looking forward to joining you again in your future events.
And just to add, it would not have happened in others if it had not happened in the diaspora community. Pan-Africanism started out of the continent. And that went on for decades before it really became what it was. And I know the work that was even done behind the scenes afterwards. If you look at Kwame Nkrumah and all those that were behind him, several names, Padmore, Du Bois, and all the amazing, people who were still on. So I'm sure, Brother Barry, you can see the connection that it started from out of the continent, and we have to reach out across both ways and get help as we go along. I mean, because we cannot get out of this our dismemberment without connecting to the other side of us. And that's it. We are all connected. So thank you.
Dr. Harrell, going once, go. If it's a no, we respect that. Oh, thank you. Wonderful. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. I will say that I am so very excited about us. I'm so very excited about us. And the one thing that I walked away from in Ghana was, man, we can do this. We got together. We were able to come together, have tough conversations, but also have healing conversations in that. I am so happy and so grateful for you all. And I'm really excited about what we are to become. And what we're going to do. And so without further ado,
Sorry, just let me say that
yes, sir.
one of the key persons we hardly mentioned about the elders who guided Kwame Nkrumah is Ras Makonnen. And he had a special relationship with Nkrumah all the way, so much so that when he felt Nkrumah was not going the right way, he actually went and told him and said, Kwame, what you are doing may not lead us where we set out to do. And actually said, Kwame, if I could not come to you at this point in time, then we are finished. And it's all there. I mean, this is what we need to be looking at that. We tend to mention, Padmore, but there is also that voice. There were all these critical voices that also guided us as we did our best. Of course, sometimes went astray, and we need that. We need those moments. We need those elders. We need those moments to be guided as we go along into the future. Just to add that point. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And Kwesi, will you type that in the chat so we have the right spelling for that as well? Thank you. So without further ado, I would like to bring forth Anid Gaddis, who is going to close us out with her beautiful poem. And we will see you in the next conversation.
Thank you. Can everyone hear me okay? I'm looking at you, Chandra. Can you hear me okay?
I can
just
hear
wanna
you.
make sure. Okay. Sorry about that. Thank you. All right. So this is a piece I wrote this in November, December of 2024, and I'm pleased to share it with you. We don't need permission. We don't need permission to exist, to walk in rooms, open doors, shatter glass ceilings, or knock down brick walls. Refusing to blend in, bow down, or back out, we stand, speaking in rhythms that shake the air, our laughter a sacred libation, poured out as an offering, inhaled by the sun, and received as replenishment of both soil and soul. Our style is not trend, it is testimony, braided crowns, locks spiraling to skies, majestic melanin absorbing light and radiating warmth. This skin is both scripture and story, every scar a sacred marker of battles won and lost, every freckle a note in the symphony of our survival. Our walk is both witness and substance, a righteous glide that conquers the jagged, uneven terrain that attempts to thwart our forward progress. When the ground gives way, we fly, defying gravity, often on the strength of just one wing. When the path floods, we float through shark-infested waters on makeshift rafts crafted from planks of perseverance and determination, buoyed by prayer and held together by dreams of a better future. We don't need permission. On divine assignment, we will not be denied. Fashioned by the hands of the divine, gorgeous and glorious, a regal spectrum of shapes, sizes, textures, and tones, an intricate tapestry of legacies lived and lessons learned, approved and anointed by the one who made all things. Your approval, unnecessary and inconsequential, offered or withheld, it changes nothing. We good over here. We are treasures wrapped in love and light, a divine constellation of creativity, artistry, and don't mess with me, shining brightly, at times beloved, at times betrayed, but always becoming. We don't need permission. We exist and advance as a sacred reflection, each step a prayer and a promise, each smile an affirmation of strength and hope, each tear a silent confession of joy and pain, each word spoken in the language of love and justice, each individual a spark, igniting our collective fire, inspired by the author of existence and eternity. We don't just survive. Oh no, we thriving over here. Vibing to the beat of faith, we remix the pain, flip the sorrow, turn ashes into jazz, turn struggle into celebration, turn grief into gospel, and trauma into triumph. Architects of language, we turn words into worlds, wrapping the plain and mundane in soul, and style. Our sagacity has no ceiling. We turn can'ts into cans and dead ends into new beginnings. Our joy is both witness and resistance, defiance and deliverance. Even when they try to shrink and silence us, we expand. We stretch out and sound off, filling up the room with boldness and brilliance, provoking the atmosphere to acknowledge our existence. We don't need permission. With heads held high in honor of our ancestors, we walk, run, and sometimes dance into the future. We are their wildest dreams, now come true. We carry their prayers in our pockets. We hold their pain in our hearts, eternally accessorized by their strength. Their voices echo in our now and in our next. We are infinite, a kaleidoscope of Black and brown vibrance, never stagnant, always evolving. Put us in a box? Certainly not. We defy your labels and low expectations. We stand creator approved, unstoppable. We don't need permission. We never did, and we never will. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. And so, on that note, have a beautiful.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chandra. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, Chandra.
Bye, everyone.
do you win you get way twin? Lutua uno weg luen. Apora me caraba. Apora que lo luen. Lutua uno weg luen. Lutua uno